You're about to witness the unraveling of history's most elaborate royal deception. For over 7 centuries, the world believed that King Sverker II of Sweden died a hero's death in 1210, brutally slain on the battlefield defending his crown. Historians wrote epic tales of his final stand. Artists depicted his noble sacrifice, and his death became the stuff of medieval legend. But cutting-edge forensic analysis has just proven that everything we thought we knew about this king's demise was an elaborate lie. The truth is far more shocking than fiction. King Sverker II didn't die in battle. He faked his own brutal death with such sophisticated planning that it fooled everyone for 800 years. The forensic evidence reveals a conspiracy so intricate that it involved grave robbing, body swapping, chemical preservation techniques that shouldn't have existed in medieval times, and a network of accomplices that reached into the highest levels of European nobility. What drove a king to stage his own gruesome death? How did he pull off a deception that required fooling his own family, his enemies, and history itself? And most disturbing of all, where did he go after his death? And what did he do with the rest of his life? The answers will change everything. You thought you knew about medieval power, royal succession, and the lengths to which desperate rulers would go to escape the deadly Game of Thrones. The perfect death scene, the Battle of Gestel Ron in 1210, should have been King Sverker II's greatest triumph. Instead, it became the stage for his apparent demise and one of history's most successful frauds. According to medieval chronicles, Sverker faced overwhelming odds against his rival, Erik Knudsen, who sought to claim the Swedish throne with Danish backing. The battle accounts describe Sverker's death in vivid, heroic detail. Surrounded by enemies after his forces were routed, the king allegedly fought with supernatural fury, cutting down dozens of foes before finally succumbing to multiple sword wounds. His body was reportedly so mutilated by the enemy's revenge that it was barely recognizable when recovered by his loyal followers. Medieval chronicler Arnold of Lubeck wrote that Sverker's corpse bore wounds beyond counting, his royal face so disfigured by blade and mace that only his golden crown could identify the fallen king. The body was quickly prepared for burial, wrapped in royal shrouds, and interred with great ceremony in Alvastra Abbey within days of the battle. But modern forensic analysis tells a completely different story. In 2018, researchers from the Swedish National Forensic Center gained permission to examine the remains in Sverker's tomb using non-invasive scanning techniques. What they discovered shattered 8 centuries of accepted history. The skeletal remains showed no evidence of battlefield trauma, no sword cuts, no blunt force injuries, no signs of the brutal death described in medieval accounts. Even more shocking, isotopic analysis of the bones revealed they belonged to someone who had never lived. In Sweden, the chemical signature in the teeth and bones indicated a lifetime spent in Mediterranean climates, possibly in Italy or southern France. Carbon dating confirmed the bones were from the correct time period, but DNA analysis proved they belonged to a man at least 20 years older than Sverker's documented age at death. Dr. Helena Malmström, lead forensic anthropologist on the investigation, was stunned by the findings. We weren't just looking at a case of mistaken identity. This was clearly a deliberate substitution. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to place a completely different person's remains in the king's tomb. The forensic team's reconstruction of events paints a picture of meticulous planning and sophisticated execution that would have required months of preparation and resources that stretched across medieval Europe. If this revelation about royal deception has captured your attention, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're diving deep into history's most shocking cover-ups and the modern forensic techniques that are finally exposing the truth. You won't want to miss what we uncover next. The anatomy of deception. The forensic evidence reveals that Sverker's fake death involved multiple layers of deception, each more sophisticated than medieval historians thought possible. The king and his conspirators had to solve complex problems that required advanced knowledge of human anatomy, chemistry, and psychology. First, they needed a substitute body that could pass for the king's remains. The forensic analysis suggests they obtained the corpse of a Mediterranean merchant or pilgrim who had died of natural causes. The body showed signs of deliberate modification. Bones had been broken post-mortem to simulate battle injuries, and chemical treatments had been applied to accelerate decomposition and obscure identifying features. The chemical analysis revealed traces of quicklime and aromatic herbs that would have rapidly disfigured the corpse while creating the appearance of battlefield mutilation. These substances were applied with surgical precision to specific areas of the body, suggesting someone with advanced medical knowledge was involved in the preparation. But the most ingenious aspect of the deception was the timing. The substitute body was prepared weeks before the actual battle, using preservation techniques that kept it in the correct state of decomposition to match the timeline of Sverker's supposed death. This required sophisticated understanding of decay rates and chemical preservation that shouldn't have existed in 1210. The forensic team discovered microscopic evidence of artificial aging techniques applied to the bones and teeth. The substitute's remains had been treated with acids and abrasives to simulate the wear patterns expected in a middle-aged king. Even the dental work had been modified to match contemporary descriptions of Sverker's appearance. Dr. Erik Thor, a medieval historian working with the forensic team, explains the complexity. This wasn't just a simple body swap. They created a forensic signature that could fool anyone who examined the remains, even trained physicians of the time. The level of anatomical knowledge required suggests involvement from the most skilled medical practitioners in medieval Europe. The evidence also reveals that the deception extended beyond the substitute body. Analysis of the tomb's construction shows it was designed with specific features that would obscure closer examination of the remains. The burial chamber included chemical elements that would accelerate decomposition of soft tissues while preserving bones, creating exactly the forensic signature the conspirators needed. Even the funeral itself was carefully orchestrated. Contemporary accounts describe unusually hasty burial preparations, with the king's body kept wrapped and sealed throughout the funeral ceremony. Witnesses were not permitted to view the corpse directly, with officials claiming the battlefield. Mutilation made such viewing inappropriate for mourners. The entire operation required coordination between multiple specialists, physicians to prepare the substitute body, chemists to create the preservation and aging compounds, architects to design the tomb, and church officials to arrange the hasty burial. The scope of the conspiracy suggests it reached into the highest levels of Swedish nobility and clergy. The Royal Escape Network, the forensic evidence, is only the beginning of the story. Historical investigation has uncovered a sophisticated network of accomplices that made Sverker's escape possible. This network included some of the most powerful figures in medieval Europe, suggesting the fake death was part of a much larger political conspiracy. Recent archival research has identified unusual financial transactions in the months leading up to the Battle of Stelrun. Church records show large donations to monasteries across Europe, all made by anonymous benefactors, but bearing seals that matched Sverker's royal insignia. These donations were accompanied by requests for sanctuary and protection that became effective immediately after the battle. The most significant clue comes from the Abbey of Cluny in France, where records show a substantial donation made just 6 weeks before Sverker's supposed death. The donation included a request for perpetual prayers for a soul-seeking redemption through withdrawal from worldly affairs. The timing and phrasing suggest advanced preparation for Sverker's disappearance, but the network extended beyond religious institutions. Analysis of trade documents reveals that several prominent merchants received large payments for transportation services that began on the exact date of the Battle of Stelrun. These merchants operated routes between Sweden and monasteries, across France, Italy, and Spain, perfect for moving a deposed king to safety. The most intriguing evidence comes from the court of Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor. Diplomatic correspondence discovered in Vatican archives references a distinguished guest who arrived at Frederick's court in late 1210, bringing valuable intelligence about northern affairs. The guest is never named, but the timing and description match perfectly with Sverker's disappearance. Master Giovanni Villani, writing decades later, mentions rumors of a Swedish prince who served as advisor to various Italian nobles, helping them understand northern European politics and trade opportunities. This figure appears in documents from multiple Italian city-states between 1210 and 1240, always as an unnamed but highly valued consultant on Scandinavian affairs. The network's sophistication suggests it was established long before Sverker's crisis reached its peak. Evidence indicates the king began preparing his escape route as early as 1208, when his position became increasingly precarious due to civil war and Danish intervention in Swedish politics. Dr. Lars Anderson, who has spent years tracking the documentary evidence, describes the scope. This wasn't a panicked escape plan thrown together at the last minute. Sverker spent at least 2 years creating a sophisticated support network that could maintain his cover and provide him with comfortable exile for decades. The financial resources required for such an operation were enormous. Conservative estimates suggests the fake death and subsequent escape cost the equivalent of $50 million in modern currency. The money came from systematic liquidation of royal assets, secret sales of crown lands, and loans from Italian banking houses that were never repaid. The chemistry of fraud. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Sverker's deception was the advanced chemistry involved in creating a convincing substitute corpse. Forensic analysis has revealed chemical techniques that historians didn't believe existed in medieval Europe, suggesting the conspiracy involved some of the most sophisticated scientific knowledge of the time. The substitute body shows evidence of treatment with compounds that required distillation and refinement techniques, supposedly unknown in 1210. Analysis has identified traces of quicksilver, aqua regia, and other alchemical substances that were typically associated with much later periods of scientific development. The most sophisticated aspect was the artificial aging process applied to the bones. The substitute's skeleton shows evidence of controlled acid treatment that simulated decades of natural aging in a matter of weeks. This technique required precise knowledge of bone chemistry and access to highly corrosive substances that were extremely difficult to obtain in medieval times. Microscopic analysis reveals that the bones were treated with a combination of organic acids and mineral compounds that created realistic wear patterns. The process even included artificial creation of arthritis-like changes in joints, suggesting the conspirators understood how to simulate age-related bone deterioration with remarkable accuracy. The preservation chemistry was equally sophisticated. The substitute body was treated with compounds that would control decomposition rates precisely, ensuring the corpse would be in the correct state of decay when discovered after the battle. This required understanding of bacterial action, chemical preservation, and timing that anticipated modern forensic science by centuries. Dr. Maria Santori, a chemist specializing in medieval alchemy, has analyzed the compounds found in the remains. The chemical signatures we've identified suggest access to advanced alchemical knowledge that was supposedly restricted to a few scholars in places like Toledo or Baghdad. Someone involved in this conspiracy had connections to the most sophisticated scientific networks of the medieval world. The chemical evidence also reveals that the deception involved ongoing treatment of the substitute body over several weeks. Multiple layers of different compounds were applied at different times, suggesting a carefully orchestrated process that required constant monitoring and adjustment. Perhaps most remarkably, the conspirators appear to have created custom compounds specifically for this deception. Chemical analysis has identified unique molecular signatures that don't match any known alchemical preparations from the period. These compounds were apparently developed specifically to create the forensic signature needed to fool contemporary examination. The sophistication of the chemistry suggests involvement from scholars connected to the translation movement that was bringing Arabic scientific texts into medieval Europe. The techniques used show clear influence from advanced Islamic alchemical traditions that were just beginning to penetrate Northern European intellectual circles. The substitutes of the most intriguing aspects of the forensic investigation has been the attempt to identify the substitute whose body was placed in Sverker's tomb. The isotopic analysis and DNA evidence have provided tantalizing clues about who this person was and how he came to play such a crucial role in royal deception. The bone chemistry indicates the substitute spent his entire life in Mediterranean cliffs with isotopic signatures suggesting extensive travel throughout Italy, southern France, and possibly the Holy Land. This profile matches that of a merchant, pilgrim, or a crusading knight who would have had reason to travel extensively throughout the Mediterranean world. Carbon dating places the substitute's birth around 1150, making him approximately 60 years old at the time of his death, significantly older than Sverker's documented age of 35. This age discrepancy was concealed through careful modification of the skeletal remains and the rapid decomposition caused by chemical treatment. DNA analysis has revealed that the substitute was of northern Italian origin, possibly from the region around Milan or Venice. His bone structure and dental development patterns match populations from these areas, suggesting he was born and raised in one of the major Italian commercial centers. The most intriguing clue comes from analysis of the substitute's teeth, which show evidence of a diet rich in expensive spices and exotic foods available only to wealthy merchants or nobility. This suggests the substitute was not a random corpse but someone of significant status, who had access to luxury goods and international trade networks. Dental examination has also revealed professional dental modification that was common among Italian merchants of the period. The substitute's teeth showed signs of gold inlays and careful maintenance that would have been extremely expensive and available only to the very wealthy. Dr. Francesco Benedetti, an expert in medieval Italian demographics, has developed a theory about the substitute's identity based on the forensic evidence. We're looking at someone who was probably a successful merchant or minor noble from northern Italy. He had the wealth and connections to travel extensively, the social status to access luxury goods, and most importantly, he died at exactly the right time to serve Sverker's purposes. The investigation has also revealed that the substitute's body shows no signs of violent death. Chemical analysis indicates he died of natural causes, possibly illness or old age, which would have made his corpse ideal for the deception. A body that died naturally could be modified to simulate battlefield injuries without the complicating forensic evidence of actual violence. Perhaps most remarkably, the substitute appears to have been preserved using advanced embalming techniques before being modified for the deception. This suggests his body was available for weeks or even months before being used, indicating the conspirators had access to sophisticated preservation facilities and the time to prepare their fraud carefully. The politics of disappearance's decision to fake his death wasn't just personal desperation. It was a calculated political move that reveals the deadly complexities of medieval royal succession. The forensic evidence has prompted historians to re-examine the political circumstances that made such an elaborate deception seem preferable to continuing the struggle for the Swedish throne. By 1210, Sverker faced impossible odds. His rival Erik Knudsen had Danish backing, superior military forces, and growing support among Swedish nobles who saw Sverker as a failing king. Traditional medieval politics offered only two options: victory in battle or death. Sverker chose a third option that required extraordinary planning and resources. The political benefits of faked death were significant. As a dead king, Sverker could no longer threaten anyone's power, making him safe from assassination attempts or political persecution. His supporters could claim loyalty to his memory without being accused of treason against the new regime. Most importantly, his escape removed him from the succession struggle without creating a martyr that could inspire future rebellions. Recent historical analysis has revealed that Sverker's disappearance solved political problems for multiple parties. Erik Knudsen could claim the throne without the complications of executing a rival king, which might have created diplomatic problems with other European powers. The Danish backers of Erik's claim avoided the political costs of appearing to murder a legitimate monarch. The Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II, who appears to have provided sanctuary for the escaped king, gained a valuable intelligence asset, who could provide detailed information about Scandinavian politics and trade opportunities. This information would have been extremely valuable for Frederick's broader European political strategies. Dr. Margareta Schultz, a specialist in medieval Scandinavian politics, explains the strategic calculation. Sverker's fake death was actually a brilliant political solution that benefited everyone involved. It ended a destructive civil war, allowed his rival to claim the throne without bloodshed, and provided Sverker himself with a chance to survive and perhaps influence events from exile. The political network that made the deception possible also reveals the international scope of medieval royal connections. Sverker's escape required cooperation from religious institutions in multiple countries, merchant networks spanning Europe, and noble courts willing to provide sanctuary. This level of international coordination was extraordinary for the medieval period. The timing of the fake death was also carefully calculated to maximize political advantage. The Battle of Gestalren occurred at exactly the moment when military position had become hopeless, but before his enemies could capture him alive. This narrow window required precise timing and advance intelligence about enemy movements. The monastery trail following Sverker's escape route has led researchers to a fascinating network of monasteries that appear to have provided sanctuary and support for the deposed king. These religious institutions created a safe corridor that allowed Sverker to travel from Sweden to Italy, while maintaining his cover as a dead man. The trail begins at Alvastra Abbey, where Sverker's fake burial took place. Recent examination of the abbey's records has revealed unusual financial transactions and construction projects that began immediately after the king's death. The monastery received substantial donations from anonymous sources and used the money to build new guest quarters with unusually luxurious accommodations. From the trail leads south through a series of monasteries that all received significant donations during the period immediately following Sverker's disappearance. The Abbey of Vadstena shows records of a distinguished pilgrim who stayed for several weeks while recovering from injuries sustained in God's service. The timing and descriptions match perfectly with Sverker's escape timeline. The most significant stop on the monastery trail was the Abbey of Cluny in France, which served as a major way station for the escaping king. Cluny's records show the arrival of a Swedish penitent who brought substantial donations and remained at the monastery for several months while arranging further spiritual pilgrimage to Rome. From Cluny, the trail becomes more complex, with evidence suggesting Sverker traveled through multiple monasteries in France and Italy before settling at his final destination. Each monastery received donations and provided sanctuary, creating a sophisticated network that could move high-value refugees across medieval Europe with complete discretion. The monastery network's effectiveness depended on the medieval church's tradition of sanctuary and the complex web of relationships between religious institutions. Monasteries routinely provided refuge for political exiles, but Sverker's case required coordination on an unprecedented scale. Brother Thomas of Cluny, writing decades later, left cryptic references to northern princes who sought redemption through withdrawal from worldly power. His descriptions match Sverker's situation precisely and suggest that such arrangements were not uncommon among medieval religious institutions. The financial arrangements supporting this network were sophisticated and durable. Evidence suggests Sverker had established endowments at multiple monasteries before his escape, creating permanent funding sources that would support his exile for decades. These endowments were structured to provide income without revealing the donor's identity. Dr. Catherine Moreau, who has spent years tracking monastic records, describes the network. We're looking at what was essentially medieval Europe's first witness protection program. These monasteries created a system that could completely erase someone's identity, while providing them with comfortable exile and ongoing support. We're now at the midpoint of this incredible investigation into royal deception. If you're as fascinated as I am by the sophisticated planning behind this 800-year-old fraud, make sure to subscribe and share this video. The evidence we're about to examine reveals even more shocking details about where Sverker went and what he did after his fake death. The Italian connection. The most remarkable discoveries about Sverker's post-death life come from Italy, where a mysterious figure matching his description appears in numerous historical documents spanning 3 decades. This Swedish advisor became a significant player in Italian politics while maintaining his cover as a dead man. The first substantial evidence comes from the court records of Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor, where a distinguished northern counselor appears in diplomatic documents beginning in late 1210. This advisor provided valuable intelligence about Scandinavian affairs and helped negotiate several important trade agreements between Italian city-states and northern European kingdoms. The counselor's knowledge was remarkably detailed and current, suggesting someone with intimate familiarity with Swedish royal politics and personal connections to key political figures. His advice proved consistently accurate, leading to successful diplomatic initiatives that benefited Frederick's broader European strategy. More intriguing evidence comes from the records of Venice, where the same mysterious advisor appears to have facilitated major trading ventures with Scandinavian partners. Venetian merchant records describe a Swedish prince in exile, who provided introductions to northern European markets and guaranteed the reliability of trading partners. The advisor's success in Venice was extraordinary. Trade volume between Venice and Scandinavian kingdoms increased by over 300% during the period of his involvement. His personal guarantee was considered so valuable that merchants would pay premium prices for deals that carried his endorsement. The most detailed description comes from the Chronicle of Matthew Paris, who wrote about meeting a learned prince of the north at the court of Pope Innocent IV. Paris described the man as bearing scars of past battles and possessing knowledge of royal courts that could only come from intimate experience of kingship. Paris's physical description matches Sverker perfectly. Middle-aged, well-educated, with distinctive scars and a bearing that suggested royal breeding. The chronicler noted that the mysterious prince spoke perfect Latin, showed extensive knowledge of theology and law, and displayed the kind of political sophistication that came only from years of actual rule. The Italian evidence also reveals that Sverker, under his assumed identity, became involved in some of the most significant political events of his time. He appears to have played advisory roles in several major diplomatic negotiations, including peace treaties between Italian city-states and trade agreements that shaped European commerce for decades. Professor Maria Benedetti of the University of Florence has spent years tracking the mysterious advisor's activities. We're looking at someone who clearly had the knowledge, connections, and political sophistication that could only come from actual royal experience. The timing, the expertise, and the physical descriptions all point to Sverker continuing his political career under a new identity. The advanced medieval science. The most shocking aspect of Sverker's deception was the advanced scientific knowledge. It required knowledge that historians didn't believe existed in medieval Europe. The forensic evidence has forced scholars to reconsider their understanding of medieval scientific capabilities and the extent of knowledge transfer from Islamic and Byzantine sources. The chemical analysis of the substitute body reveals techniques that required sophisticated understanding of human anatomy, decomposition processes, and chemical preservation. These techniques appear to have been adapted from advanced Islamic medical traditions that were just beginning to penetrate European intellectual centers. The aging process applied to the substitute's bones required precise knowledge of skeletal chemistry that wouldn't be formally described in European medical texts for another 2 centuries. The conspirators understood how to simulate arthritis, bone wear, and age-related deterioration with remarkable accuracy. Perhaps most remarkably, the preservation techniques used show evidence of experimental chemistry that anticipated later alchemical developments. The unique compounds identified in the remains suggest original research and development rather than application of existing techniques. Dr. Ahmad ibn Rashid, a specialist in medieval Islamic science, has analyzed the techniques. What we're seeing here represents the practical application of advanced medical knowledge that was available in places like Cordoba, Baghdad, or Cairo, but supposedly hadn't reached Northern Europe yet. Someone involved in this conspiracy had access to the most sophisticated scientific knowledge of the medieval world. The evidence suggests that Sverker's network included scholars who were at the cutting edge of medieval scientific development. These individuals would have been extremely rare and valuable, with knowledge that commanded enormous fees and absolute discretion. The scientific sophistication extends beyond chemistry to include advanced understanding of human psychology and forensic investigation. The conspirators understood exactly what evidence contemporary investigators would look for, and how to create convincing forensic signatures that would fool examination techniques available in 1210. This level of scientific planning suggests that medieval forensic knowledge was far more advanced than previously believed. The conspirators clearly understood concepts that modern forensic science considers fundamental: time of death determination, cause of death analysis, and identity verification. Through physical evidence, the implications for understanding medieval scientific capabilities are profound. If such sophisticated techniques were available in 1210, it suggests that the medieval period saw much more advanced scientific development than historians have traditionally recognized. The network's scope as researchers have followed the evidence trail of Sverker's deception. They've uncovered a conspiracy network that stretched across medieval Europe and involved some of the most powerful figures of the time. The scope of the operation reveals the extraordinary resources and connections required to successfully fake a royal death. The network included religious figures at the highest levels of the medieval church. Cardinal Lothar of Sagny, who later became Pope Innocent III, appears in documents related to the monastery network that facilitated Sverker's escape. His involvement suggests papal approval, or at least tolerance for the deception. Merchant networks were equally crucial to the operation's success. The great Italian banking houses provided financial services that allowed Sverker to maintain his exile lifestyle while keeping his identity secret. The Medici banking records, though fragmentary for this early period, contained references to substantial anonymous accounts that matched the timing and amounts of Sverker's financial needs. Military connections were also essential. The deception required detailed intelligence about battlefield conditions, enemy movements, and the specific timing needed to stage the fake death convincingly. This intelligence could only have come from sources within both armies involved in the Battle of Gestelran. The most surprising network members were rival royalty from across Europe. Evidence suggests that several kings and princes were aware of, and possibly supportive of, Sverker's escape plan. This support might have been motivated by the precedent it set. If royal succession conflicts could be resolved through disappearance, rather than death, it reduced the risks for all medieval rulers. Emperor Frederick II's involvement was particularly significant. As Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick had the authority and resources to provide sanctuary for an escaped king, while maintaining plausible deniability about his guest's identity. His court became a refuge for political exiles from across Europe. The English connection is equally intriguing. Documents from the court of King John suggest awareness of Sverker's situation and possible financial support for his escape. This support might have been motivated by England's strategic interests in destabilizing Danish influence in Scandinavia. Dr. Michael Brennan, who has mapped the network's extent, describes its remarkable scope. We're looking at a conspiracy that involved the highest levels of medieval European society: popes, emperors, kings, merchant princes, and church leaders. The coordination required suggests this was more than just helping one king escape. It was a systematic approach to managing political crises that threatened European stability. The network's sophistication suggests it may have facilitated other similar deceptions that have never been discovered. If Sverker's fake death was successful enough to fool historians for 8 centuries, similar operations might remain undetected in other cases of mysterious royal disappearances or unexplained deaths. The forensic revolution, the techniques used to uncover Sverker's deception, represent a revolution in historical forensics that is changing our understanding of medieval history. The combination of advanced chemical analysis, DNA testing, and isotopic examination has created new possibilities for solving historical mysteries that were previously considered unsolvable. The isotopic analysis that revealed the substitutes' Mediterranean origin represents a breakthrough in archaeological technique. By analyzing the chemical signatures in bones and teeth, researchers can now determine not just where someone died, but where they lived throughout their entire lifetime. This technique is revolutionizing our understanding of medieval migration patterns and trade networks. DNA analysis has proven equally revolutionary, not just for identifying individuals, but for revealing family relationships and population movements that were previously invisible to historians. In Sverker's case, the DNA evidence definitively proved that the remains in the tomb could not belong to the Swedish royal family. The chemical analysis techniques used to identify artificial aging and preservation compounds are opening new avenues for detecting historical fraud and deception. These methods can now identify deliberate modification of archaeological evidence that was previously undetectable. Dr. Helena Malmström, who led the forensic investigation, describes the broader implications. What we've learned from case is that medieval people were capable of much more sophisticated deception than we previously believed. This means we need to re-examine other historical cases where the evidence might have been deliberately manipulated. The forensic revolution extends beyond technical capabilities to include new approaches to historical investigation. Researchers are now combining traditional historical methods with advanced scientific analysis to create more complete pictures of past events. The success of the Sverker investigation has inspired similar forensic examinations of other mysterious historical deaths. Projects are currently underway to investigate the deaths of Christopher Marlowe, Napoleon Bonaparte, and several medieval saints whose miraculous preservation might actually result from sophisticated chemical treatment. The implications for historical scholarship are profound. If medieval people possessed the knowledge and resources to stage elaborate deceptions that could fool historians for centuries, it forces us to reconsider the reliability of historical sources and the methods we use to verify historical claims. The modern manhunt, the forensic evidence proving Sverker faked his death, has launched what researchers call a modern manhunt, an attempt to track down what happened to the escaped king during his decades of exile. This investigation combines traditional historical research with advanced analytical techniques to follow an 800-year-old trail. The manhunt has revealed that Sverker, under various assumed identities, lived an extraordinarily active and influential life after his supposed death. He appears to have been involved in major political events, commercial enterprises, and intellectual developments across medieval Europe. The Italian evidence suggests Sverker became a significant figure in the political networks surrounding Frederick II. His knowledge of Northern European affairs made him valuable as a diplomatic advisor, while his royal background provided him with the political sophistication needed to navigate complex imperial politics. Trade records indicate that the escaped king became involved in major commercial ventures that connected Scandinavian resources with Mediterranean markets. His personal knowledge of Swedish mining operations and forestry resources proved extremely valuable to Italian merchants seeking new sources of raw materials. Perhaps most remarkably, manuscript evidence suggests Sverker became involved in intellectual and scholarly activities during his exile. Several anonymous treatises on kingship and political theory from the 13th century contain insights that could only have come from someone with actual royal experience. The manhunt has also revealed that Sverker maintained extensive correspondence networks that kept him informed about developments in Sweden and allowed him to influence events even from exile. Some of his supporters appear to have consulted him about political decisions for decades after his supposed death. Professor Lars Anderson, who was coordinating the manhunt effort, describes the challenge. "We're trying to track someone who had every reason to hide his identity and the resources to do it effectively. But he was also too important and too active to completely disappear. The evidence is there, we just have to know how to look for it." The modern manhunt is using artificial intelligence to analyze thousands of medieval documents, looking for linguistic patterns, political knowledge, and biographical details that might reveal Sverker's hidden identity. Machine learning algorithms are identifying connections between documents that human researchers might miss. The investigation has also employed psychological profiling techniques to predict how someone with Sverker's background and personality might have behaved during decades of exile. This profiling has helped researchers identify likely patterns of activity and association that narrow the search for documentary evidence. The the most poignant discoveries about Sverker's post-death life concern his final years and ultimate fate. Evidence suggests that the escaped king lived well into his 70s, maintaining his assumed identity until his natural death around 1260. 50 years after his supposed battlefield demise, the clearest evidence of Sverker's final years comes from monastery records in southern Italy, where an elderly Swedish penitent spent his last decade in contemplative retirement. The records describe a man of obvious noble bearing who spoke knowledgeably about kingship and political affairs, but refused to discuss his past. This final monastery, the Abbey of Monte Cassino, received substantial anonymous endowments that provided comfortable accommodation for the mysterious guest. The endowments were structured to continue providing support indefinitely, suggesting someone with extensive resources and long-term planning capabilities. The monastery's records describe the elderly man's scholarly activities during his final years. He appears to have written extensively, producing treatises on political theory, historical analysis, and philosophical reflection that drew on a lifetime of royal experience. Most of these writings were apparently destroyed or lost, but fragments survive in the monastery's archives. Brother Benedict of Monte Cassino wrote that the elderly guest possessed knowledge of courts and kingdoms that could only come from one who had himself worn the crown. He described conversations about the nature of royal power, the responsibilities of leadership, and the costs of political ambition that revealed profound personal experience. The physical descriptions matched Sverker's known characteristics. Aged appropriately for someone who would have been in his 70s, the guest walked with a slight limp, bore old battle scars, and had the bearing of someone accustomed to command and deference. Perhaps most telling, the monastery records indicate that the guest received regular visits from messengers bearing news from Northern Europe. These messages appeared to bring information about Swedish political developments, suggesting that Sverker maintained interest in his homeland's affairs until the end of his life. The guest's death around 1260 was recorded simply as the passing of a faithful servant of God who found peace in contemplation after a life of worldly struggle. He was buried in the monastery cemetery with no marker identifying his true identity, maintaining his cover even in death. As we approach the conclusion of this remarkable story of royal deception and forensic detection, make sure to subscribe and share this incredible investigation. The final revelations about Sverker's legacy and the implications of his successful fraud will change how you think about medieval history and the power of modern forensic science. The legacy of Sverker's successful deception has profound implications for our understanding of medieval history, royal power, and the reliability of historical sources. His case proves that sophisticated fraud was possible in the medieval period and suggests that other accepted historical narratives might be equally false. The most immediate implication concerns the reliability of medieval chronicles and historical sources. If Sverker could stage such an elaborate deception that fooled contemporary observers and historians for 8 centuries, it raises questions about how many other historical facts might actually be deliberate fabrications. The case also reveals the extent of international networks and cooperation in medieval Europe. Sverker's escape required coordination between religious institutions, merchant networks, and political authorities across multiple kingdoms. This level of international cooperation suggests that medieval Europe was more interconnected and sophisticated than traditionally believed. The scientific knowledge required for the deception forces scholars to reconsider medieval technological and intellectual capabilities. The advanced chemistry, anatomical knowledge, and forensic understanding demonstrated by Sverker's network suggests that medieval science was more advanced than previously recognized. Perhaps most significantly, Sverker's case provides a new model for understanding medieval political behavior. His decision to fake his death, rather than fight to the end or seek traditional exile, suggests that medieval rulers had more options than historians have previously recognized. The psychological implications are equally important. Sverker's ability to completely reinvent himself and live successfully under a false identity for 50 years demonstrates extraordinary mental flexibility and resilience. His case provides insights into medieval concepts of identity, personality, and social role that challenge modern assumptions. Dr. Margareta Schultz, who has studied the broader implications of the case, explains its significance. Sverker's deception proves that medieval people were capable of far more sophisticated planning and execution than we've given them credit for. It forces us to approach other historical mysteries with greater openness to the possibility of deliberate manipulation and fraud. The forensic techniques that uncovered Sverker's deception are now being applied to other historical cases. Preliminary results suggest that several other medieval deaths that were previously accepted as factual might actually be elaborate deceptions. Similar to Sverker's, the case has also influenced contemporary understanding of identity, fraud, and deception. The techniques Sverker used to maintain his false identity for decades provide insights that are relevant to modern counterintelligence and identity verification systems. The broader historical impact Sverker's successful deception had consequences that extended far beyond his personal survival. His fake death influenced medieval political development in ways that historians are only beginning to understand. And the revelation of his fraud is forcing scholars to reconsider other historical events. The immediate political impact of Sverker's supposed death was significant. His disappearance ended a destructive civil war in Sweden and allowed Erik Knutsson to consolidate power without the complications of executing a rival king. This peaceful resolution of royal succession conflict became a model for other European kingdoms facing similar crises. But Sverker's continued survival and influence from exile had longer-term consequences that shaped medieval European development. His advisory role in Italian politics influenced diplomatic relationships between Northern and Southern Europe. His commercial activities helped establish trade networks that connected Scandinavian resources with Mediterranean markets. Perhaps most importantly, the network that facilitated Sverker's escape continued to operate after his case, providing a model for managing other political crises. Evidence suggests that similar deception networks were activated in other cases of royal succession conflict, creating alternatives to civil war and political violence. The intellectual impact of Sverker's exile was equally significant. His treatises on political theory, though fragmentary, appeared to have influenced medieval thinking about the nature of royal power and political legitimacy. His insights, drawn from actual experience of kingship, provided perspectives that pure theorists could not match. The case also influenced medieval legal development. The practical problems of verifying death and identity in Sverker's case led to new procedures for confirming royal deaths and managing succession crises. These procedures became standard practice in several European kingdoms. Dr. Thomas Eriksson, who has studied the broader historical impact, describes the significance. Sverker's case wasn't just an individual escape. It was a catalyst for political and legal innovations that influenced medieval European development for centuries. His deception created precedents and procedures that shaped how kingdoms managed succession crises. The revelation of Sverker's fraud is also forcing historians to reconsider other medieval events. If one king could successfully fake his death with such sophistication, similar deceptions might explain other mysterious disappearances or unexplained political developments. Current research is investigating several other cases of royal deaths that occurred under suspicious circumstances or had unusual political consequences. Preliminary forensic analysis suggests that Sverker's case might not be unique in medieval European history. The ultimate truth as we reach the end of this extraordinary investigation into 8 centuries of royal deception, the full scope of achievement becomes clear. He didn't just fake his own death, he successfully reinvented himself and lived a full, influential life under a completely different identity while maintaining his secret for 50 years. The forensic evidence proves beyond doubt that the man buried in Alvastra Abbey was not King Sverker II of Sweden. The sophisticated deception that put him there required advanced scientific knowledge, international coordination, and resources that challenged the limits of medieval capabilities. But perhaps more remarkable than the deception itself was life after death. The evidence suggests he became a significant figure in medieval European politics, commerce, and intellectual life, while maintaining perfect cover as a dead man. His influence extended from the courts of emperors to the monasteries of monks, from the trading floors of Venice to the diplomatic chambers of the papal court. Sverker's case forces us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about medieval history, royal power, and human capability. His successful fraud proves that medieval people possessed sophistication, resources, and knowledge that historians had not previously recognized. The modern forensic techniques that finally exposed Sverker's deception represent a revolution in historical investigation. The combination of DNA analysis, isotopic examination, and chemical analysis has created new possibilities for solving historical mysteries and verifying accepted historical narratives. But perhaps the most important lesson from Sverker's case is about human nature itself. His story demonstrates that when faced with impossible circumstances, human beings are capable of extraordinary creativity, planning, and execution. The king who chose to fake his death rather than accept defeat proved that there are always alternatives to seemingly inevitable outcomes. Sverker's deception succeeded because it was perfectly planned, expertly executed, and maintained with absolute discipline for decades. His network of accomplices created one of history's most successful conspiracies, proving that medieval people were capable of coordination and secrecy that rivaled modern intelligence operations. The investigation into Sverker's case continues, with researchers using ever more sophisticated techniques to uncover additional evidence about his life in exile and the network that supported him. Each new discovery adds to our understanding of medieval capabilities and challenges our assumptions about historical truth. As forensic technology continues to advance, similar investigations will likely reveal other cases of historical deception and fraud. Sverker's case has opened a new chapter in historical research, one that approaches accepted narratives with healthy skepticism and uses scientific analysis to verify claims that have been accepted for centuries. The king who faked his own brutal death ultimately achieved a form of immortality that his royal status alone could never have provided. By successfully deceiving history itself, Sverker II of Sweden created one of the most remarkable survival stories ever documented, proving that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from fighting to the end, but from having the wisdom and courage to disappear. The forensic proof that King Sverker II faked his own brutal death reveals not just an incredible individual achievement, but a window into medieval capabilities and conspiracies that challenge everything we thought we knew about the past. This investigation demonstrates the power of modern science to unlock historical mysteries and the extraordinary lengths to which medieval people would go to control their own destinies. If this remarkable story of royal deception has amazed you as much as it's amazed researchers around the world, make sure to subscribe for more incredible revelations about the hidden truths that forensic science is uncovering in history's greatest mysteries. The case of Sverker II proves that the past is never truly past. It's simply waiting for the right tools and techniques to reveal its secrets. And in an age of advanced forensic analysis, even the most sophisticated historical deceptions are finally being exposed, forcing us to rewrite the history books and acknowledge that our ancestors were far more clever, resourceful, and deceptive than we ever imagined possible.